Good morning, good morning. It is another beautiful day in the land of enchantment, Tierra del Encanto, and welcome to Cafecito con Colon. It is a wonderful Friday. We've made it through another week. It is the 26th day of June, and it's going to be another beautiful day. Thanks for coming by to meet Chad Cooper, one dynamic human being who's a leader in Albuquerque in many, many ways, and we look forward to visiting with him about his personal journey and lived experience and the impact he has on New Mexico every day. Morning, Chad. I like that shirt.
Thank you. Good morning. It's good to see you.
Good.
Wearing the uniform today.
Yes, sir. Flying the flag of New Mexico's flagship institution of higher learning, the University of New Mexico.
There you go.
Our alma mater.
Yes, sir. Got my UNM shirt, got my Saints cup.
You are ready to go, baby. And today will be a little cooler. It's only going to get up to 93 degrees today on this 26th day of June. As we finish out the month strong, you made it to another Friday. All right, we should just get started here. It is 9 o'clock. And I've got some links I want to put up, and then we're going to bring Chad Cooper to tell a little bit about his story, his journey, and his lived experience, and the work he does in New Mexico, making a difference every day. Let me just, as usual, Channel 13 KRQ is doing a great job every day of putting up so many great stories, but this one's a nice recap of so many positive things. And in honor of Chad Cooper being my guest of honor today, this is a sports clip, which I don't think you've seen too many sports clips on Cafecito con Colon, but in honor of Chad's presence today, we're going to post this one up. It's a good one about New Mexico United, kind of their compressed season, the group that they drew out, which is Group C, which is a very competitive group. I am a very proud ticket holder. Aleli and I have tickets right next to Daniel O. Trujillo. We were early adopters of tickets at the New Mexico United before they tipped. We were some of those early people to the table to say we are going to embrace this opportunity to lift up New Mexico. And that's what United has done. Somos Unidos. And thanks to the team for continuing to be a light in our community. But this also has so many great things. Like, did you know that Eastern New Mexico won its division this year? It was the winningest football team in its division with an 8-4 overall record in 2019. Did you know that, Chad?
I had no idea.
See, I didn't think you did, and most people don't. So this is a really good story to post. And yesterday we had our deputy state treasurer on here, Sam Collins, and Sam's a graduate of Portales, or I should say a graduate of Eastern New Mexico University, and that's featured in here. And then along it also features Gabriel Montoya, a student who's going to be going off to I think Adams State. They always do a lot of good recruiting here in New Mexico. Yeah. But let me give you that link there, and that really is just a shout out to my superstar guest today because he is such a great athlete. Good morning, Mary Baca, Alfonso. Good to see you this morning. Lynn Troyon. We got all our regular Cafecito guests this morning tuning in live here on Facebook via Zoom. Let's see, what else do I have for you? Hey, speaking of something else that Chad might be paying attention to, probably has an opinion on, we won't talk much about this, but it looks like the United States House is going to vote today on statehood for DC, that region that has taxation without representation in the United States Congress, something I've supported in terms of a conversation moving forward for a very long time. But that is the story there in the Times. The other thing is, as you know, it is Pride Month, and we're coming to the close here, but this is a great clip here about today being the 5th anniversary of the United States Supreme Court decision regarding gay marriage. So I thought I would post that story up. And let's see, what else do I have for you? Oh, this is great. In fact, I'm going to do 2 links to this. because I loved it. I was having my 7 a.m. breakfast this morning with a dear friend, big time supporter. He was so excited today because he gets up crack of dawn and goes out and gets his paper. I think he's in his little robe. And he knew I was on the front page of the paper today for the work the Office of the State Auditor is doing in guardianship and conservatorship oversight. And the Journal was kind enough to give us front page coverage. And he was very excited about that. And somehow our conversation, because every conversation right now should lead back to the national dialogue we're having about race relations, about historical context, about why Black Lives Matter, and why when people say all lives matter, that really doesn't ring true for so many in our country, because until Black Lives Matter, all lives don't matter. And so, or won't matter, I should say. So anyway, that conversation led us to somehow the movies he'd been wanting me to watch. And I'm not going to be able to find it quickly. I wish I could, and I wish I could remember the name. But somebody on our guest list here is going to be able to post up. But it's a story about the African-American astronauts. And the guy that was the supervisor, she had said, I got to go to the bathroom, but I got to go walk a mile in the rain to go to the bathroom because the bathrooms at NASA were, it said, essentially white folks only, it was, I don't remember what the sign was above the bathroom. I didn't see the movie, but he was telling me about it. And I am going to find it. No, The Best of Enemies. We talked about a
recent movie or?
No, this was a few years ago. Hidden Figures.
That's
Hidden
right.
Figures from 2016. Hidden Figures. Anyway, so we're talking about that this morning over breakfast over at Jimmy's. And then of course I come to my links as I got ready to prepare, and this story was everywhere today, which was awesome because NASA, and you got to decide whether you like the worm or the not the pizza. What's the worm or the, NASA changed its logo. It used to be just that NASA, and then now it's a circle.
Right.
Looks like Star Trek, huh? Anyway, let me stay on track here, otherwise we'll never get to Chad. So NASA is naming its headquarters after Mary Jackson, its very first Black engineer. And it's totally coincidental. Did you see that, Chad?
Saw that, yeah.
It's just great. And we were talking about Hidden Figures, which I am going to watch. It's not on my Netflix, so I'm going to have to go to Amazon, and I think Raphael has an Amazon Prime thing, so maybe I'll get to watch it for free, or maybe I'll have to spend $3 and watch it. And I'll do it. I'm going to do it. I promise. Hidden Figures.
I need to do it too, honestly. I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it?
Nope.
All right, we have homework, buddy.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll meet up and do a 7 a.m. breakfast.
That's right. We can.
Since you know how much of a morning person I am.
I know. I was scared to invite you on because I thought you were going to tell me it's too early. So the first place I saw was My Optimist Daily. They covered it, and then I opened up my NPR, and NPR covered it. So I love it. Everybody's covering this. No, I know, Alex. I know I had the worm, but what's the other one they call it? Alex Flores is like NASA, the logo, the worm. I got that one, Alex. That's the other one I couldn't remember. It's the worm or the something. Now I'm going to be all distracted until
I'm going to text a buddy of mine. He used to
work. Meatball.
Okay.
It's the worm or the meatball. Do you like the worm or the meatball for NASA's logo? But thanks, Alex, for telling me what I already knew. You're awesome. I love you very much. But the worm is back. I will post that link just because I've already distracted our conversation with this. But the worm or the meatball. The worm is back. I'm kind of a fan of the meatball, but that's just me. So there you go. So I posted both the, thank you, Breezy Bree, for posting the Amazon.com Hidden Figures for Prime. And thanks for my book. I posted yesterday, Breezy Bree. And by the way, I just want to give a shout out to Bree Hudson, the dynamic young lady we had on here 2 days ago. I will say that she's broken all of the Cafecito con Colon records. She's approaching 4,000 views on the Facebook episode of Cafecito con Colon with Breezy Bree. So thank you, Bree. But when you have get a little, Chad, Bree. And if you don't, we'll fix that. But Bree. I
haven't met Bree, actually.
Oh, she's amazing. She'll teach you how to do yoga. And you're an athlete, so you need to do yoga.
My son needs to do yoga too. I'm trying to get him to do it.
Hey, Santiago is so fit. I remember holding him as a baby, and now this guy is a beast. I mean, I saw him on one of your pictures on Facebook. Yeah. The guy's got a 6-pack or an 8-pack, and he's all grown up.
I think it's 8. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Anyway, we're way off. But I'll just tell you. So Bree, this woman has like 500,000 downloads of her podcast. I mean, she's a star, and she brought some of that star power to Cafecito con Colon, and we've now had almost 4,000 views on that episode. All right, let me get to these couple others because it's now 9:09. I've got technically 6 minutes, but I want to shave a couple off of there so that we can give you a little bit more time. I mentioned early on, I think this month, about Santa Fe Reporters art contest with political cartoons, political caricatures, wild art, whatever. And it's got a little prize, I think a $50 prize. That thing's coming to a close. Now, here's the deal. If you do a political cartoon that makes me laugh, and you get bonus points if I'm actually in it, because, you know, that's the narcissist in me coming out. I'd like to see a political cartoon about myself. You know what? My favorite political Trevor cartoon is a fantastic one. It's like 16 years ago. He did an article, our Attorney General Balderas, he was a brand new legislator. We just got him elected to the House. And Trevor did this, and he was all the rave. I mean, he was like rising star, new legislator of the year. And Trevor did a yo-yo with Hector's baldness on it. And he did a yo-yo, and it was the roundhouse on the end of the yo-yo.
Nice.
Awesome political cartoon. Awesome. I bought Hector the original of that.
Perfect.
I remember, right, and gave it to him because you can buy Trevor's pieces. Anyway, that contest, I think there's a $50 prize, so I'll match it if it's a political cartoon I really love. So if you win that contest and it's a political cartoon I really love, I will match that prize. All right, the other thing I talked about, Virgin Galactic doing its launch, it was successful. Thank you to the believers in the spaceport. We're all in, so we got to make it work, folks. We spent a lot of money on that. Virgin Galactic's Spaceship 2 completed its second flight from where? Spaceport America. And where is Spaceport America? Right here in our land of enchantment. Let's make it work. Shout out to everybody that supports that. Heritage Hotels, the host hotel and tourist attraction for Virgin Galactic and Spaceport America. Big shout out to the team at Heritage Hotels and Resorts. Let me give you the next chapter in the story of love, and a community and a state and really the world in some ways has embraced India Palace. There was some really beautiful coverage of some remarks I gave up there the other day. Today's Friday, so I think it was on Wednesday. But I talked about the GoFundMe. We posted it here. Several of you made contributions. They closed the GoFundMe right after we finished our episode because they'd hit like $58,000 in just a few hours. Well, the next chapter is now they've raised over about $120,000 and it was over $100,000 worth of damage. Horrible, some of the most vile vandalism I've ever seen. But just another beautiful piece covering that effort there. Support the India Palace. Thank you to the Santa Fe New Mexican for covering that. And in my final two posts, real quick here, I'm going to give you the full coverage of the governor's pumping the brakes on phase 2. We've got to wear our mask. We've got to practice social distancing. There is a reason that we are a bright spot on the map for the COVID-19 spread. It's because the governor locked us down early. She has embraced best practices, and she has encouraged us to do the same. We've got to be vigilant. If you're outdoors, if you're in public, please wear a mask. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for the people around you that you love. Do it for our elders. Look, even Texas, even the governor of Texas, he didn't admit he was wrong, but he had to do a 180, and he is locking Texas down again. He tried to not call it a stay-at-home order, but then had to hold another press conference and actually admit, no, look, folks, this is a stay-at-home order, and he moved on that. And so Texas and Arizona are on fire right now with spread, and they're our neighbors, and we need to be vigilant here in New Mexico to protect our families, especially our most vulnerable. So let's see here. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Rebecca, for always doing some great posts and links out there. Finally, the last one, and then we're going to get right now at 9:13 over to my incredible guest of honor, my dear friend for 2 decades now. I wanted to put up, and I think I talked about this earlier, but the concert is this weekend, the summit, the Global Citizen Connect, and it's going to be led by Shakira. I know Chad Cooper loves Shakira.
Sort of my daughter does. I know my kid does too.
Yeah. We love Shakira in this house. And she is leading the way here. And, if you're not a big fan of Shakira, if you want to throw back a little bit, how about a little Coldplay? There's a little Coldplay. Usher,
Great.
Jennifer Hudson. You want how about Miley Cyrus? And the Biebs will be on there. Hey, Rosella Aaron Chisholm, the Biebs is going to be on this concert for Global Citizen. Tune in and change the world on June 27th. That's mañana. Mañana, el 27. So tune into that. With that, let me just take you from Global Citizen's big time concert tomorrow to celebrating my guest of honor, Chad Cooper. Chad Cooper is a tremendous entrepreneur, phenomenal leader, inspirational dude. You can't be around him without smiling. He's a financial advisor and is having his sweet 16th year in advising clients on how to best prepare for their future and secure the future for their families and for future generations. He works at Gateway Financial Advisors and works with them and not at, because he is an independent agent that keeps your best interest number one. He's here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He focuses on retirement income, investments, insurance, planning, all those kinds of things. He's a colleague of my dear friend, downtown Kevin Brown.
Kevin Brown.
Right? We all love Kevin Brown. That guy's been in my corner as long as I can remember, kind of like you.
Yeah.
So Chad's also, here's the exciting news, and I included the logo in his promo shot there. Beautiful wedding photos, and for our African-American chamber, we put that in there, but we also put a big T in there, and that was for Tillman Cyber Services, LLC. And Tillman Cyber Services, LLC is a company that was founded by a veteran, phenomenal human being, great life story there, and a man who has been front and center in the life of Chad Cooper for his entire life, because it's his pops. And just a really beautiful story associated with how that business came to be. And he's got some great dad, father-son stories that I've enjoyed listening to over the years. Chad's tremendously educated. He's got an MBA from the University of New Mexico. He did his undergraduate work at Middlebury College in Vermont. And he is, he's done it all. He's been Leadership Albuquerque, which is with the Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce. And he took that leadership, those models, and then brought them to the African-American Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce with his leadership on that board. He's now the vice chairman of that board, if I got that correct. Is that right? You're vice chair now?
Yeah, I'm the vice chairman. Jerron Campbell is the chairman. And then of course the
Hey, is that Dr. Campbell?
That is Dr. Jerron Campbell.
The doctor's in the house, Campbell. That's right. And he's married to a doc too, isn't she a doc too?
Yeah.
That's a lot of education into that.
That's a whole lot of doctors in the house.
That's a whole lot of doctors in the house. Is there a doctor in the house? You tell Campbell we talked about him this morning. So he is an 11-time qualifying and lifetime member of the prestigious $1 Million Roundtable. So if you're wondering if he's a good financial advisor, there you go. There's the badge of honor. He's committed to his clients, but more importantly for me, what I've known about Chad long before he got into financial advising, long before Tillman Cyber Services, he's always been committed to family and community. He's raised a beautiful son, Santiago, who I've loved watching grow up. He has always taken a deep dive into Albuquerque and the community where he loves and lives. And he's a passionate baseball player, coach, and father. He played and managed the New Mexico Men's Adult Baseball League and has managed Santiago's Little League career and club baseball team for 9 years. And his wife, incredible woman, Melita Cooper White. She's a volleyball player. She's a coach, and she teaches and is a colleague of my bride with Albuquerque Public Schools. Chad and Melita have 2 children, Santiago, who I talked about, and Amaya, who I don't know very well, but I have met, and she's a wonderful young lady. And just lots of love to this guy today. And some of these Cafecitos con Colon are a little more personal than others. Today and tomorrow will be 2 of my most personal, because Chad has been by my side as a friend and for years. And I'm so glad to have you on Cafecito con Colon.
Going back to the law school days.
That's exactly right. That makes it more than 20 years. That's exactly right. 20, almost 23 years to be exact. We're on our 23rd year. And today's Chad, and tomorrow is Tommy McKinney Jr., who I love with all my heart. He is a brother, and he will bring a tilt and a tone that is much different than anything I think we've had on Cafecito con Colon. So don't miss tomorrow morning. at 9 o'clock with my friend Tommy McKinney Jr. But today it's Mr. Chad Cooper, double C extraordinaire. What's going on, Chad?
Not too much, man. A little bit of everything. Is Tommy still in DC? Is he in
He
DC?
is. He is. You know, I've mentored that boy for 20 years, and he turned out to be my mentor. And he protected my son while he was out at GW, looked
Good.
over him for 4 years, and in a very expensive way, he fed my son on regular occasion, which is not a small financial feat.
Yeah. Well,
So
you were talking about DC statehood. DC was the last place that that I lived before moving to Albuquerque. So that statehood issue has been an issue for a long time there. I'm excited if it actually goes through.
I think it'll. I actually predict it'll pass the House and die in the Senate, just like our police
like
reform bill.
everything else.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to go to the graveyard. But let's stay focused on Chad. The one thing I didn't mention, but as I look him in that beautiful camera there, I see he's flying that flag, like I said, but he doesn't just fly it as an alum. He's actually a leader. He's a leader on our international, worldwide board of directors for the University of New Mexico Alumni Association. I'm very, very honored to have been a former president of that board, and Chad is doing a great job leading on the executive committee. He handles the finances, and just I think you're president-elect. Is that right?
Yeah, my term as president actually starts July 1st, so I'm a week away from officially taking over. So I'll
that
be
is awesome.
walking in your footsteps here. So.
Well, you will definitely overshadow anything I was able to do as president, but I'm always here to support you. So you call on me anytime.
I appreciate that. I will. I'll be
Tell
calling
us
on
about-
you, Alexis, and James, and everybody else.
That's right. You
A
know,
lot of wisdom.
James and I served on that board together for a long time. I think my recollection was I lined things up. In fact, I believe I invited him to the board and then got him to agree to serve as successor after my term was over, if I have history correct.
Well, he was the one who originally invited me.
And he passed the baton to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. We're so connected.
Yeah. Small world.
It is. Hey, Chad, tell us, let's start out this morning for our guests that don't know you as well as I do. Tell us a little bit about your journey. I know your step and chapter before New Mexico was DC, but I know you got a longer story, and take us back to when you were raised, and maybe, we're coming off of Father's Day weekend, and I love hearing you talk about your dad, and maybe share some of that. Yeah. Hey, is there a volleyball player in the house? Hey, Melita.
Hello. How are you?
Hey, the last time I saw you, you were running after me in a parking lot.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Wait. So
good to see you, Melita.
Nice to see you.
It's funny because I've told the story of growing up and kind of how I've gotten here a lot of times, but given current events, I've never really thought much about telling the story within the context of race. And it's interesting thinking about it and going back through it. I grew up in New Orleans, and where we grew up is a neighborhood called Holly Grove. You might have heard of Holly Grove in the context of music or rap lyrics coming out of New Orleans. So grew up part of my childhood in Holly Grove, which is predominantly Black neighborhood, low income neighborhood. We moved to the Broadmoor area when I was about 11. And the Broadmoor area is near Xavier University. Shout out to Tori Jacobus. But
hey, Tori, we love Tori. As soon as she takes a deep breath, she's coming on Cafecito.
All right, yeah, get her. But growing up in that neighborhood, I actually went to school at a small private school starting in first grade. I was there from first grade to 12th grade out in Metairie, Louisiana. And so, school buses would come and pick me up. My class, it was a small school. Our class had about 65 people or so in it. I was, for the most part in those 12 years, the only Black kid in the class. And at times we may have had one or two other, I don't even think we ever had two other Black students. When I graduated from the school, and this is, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were two Black students in my graduating class. And to take that a little bit further, I graduated in 1990. Our first Black graduates from that entire school graduated in 1988. So
Man, you're younger than me. Golly, I can't believe how many people I look up to that happen to be younger than me. I don't know what's wrong with my vision, but all you young folks inspire me.
that's, this lady over here keeps me hiking and biking and doing all kinds of stuff. But so at one point in our high school, I want to say there were probably 7 total Black students in the entire class, probably no more than 2 per class. So, growing up in it was a very conservative environment. Um, you know, Growing up in the 70s and 80s, obviously, in some ways was a very different time. Um, you know, Growing up, heard, racial slurs here and there throughout growing up. Or, at times I wasn't allowed to attend parties because I was Black and things like that. But an interesting story, and didn't have anything to do with school, but it's a story, and I sort of alluded to you the other day. Growing up, my family was on vacation, so we talk about my dad. My dad's a disabled veteran, and so during the summers, our big family vacation always centered around going to the Paralyzed Veterans of America conventions. And my dad kind of came up in that organization and was the national vice president in that organization
Right.
at one point. But when I was 7, we had this. One of the conventions was in Houston, and my family went. My mom and dad. I was there. I think one of my siblings was there, and we went to an Astros game at the Astrodome, and left the Astrodome. And I had one of those little baseball bats. The little baseball
Yep.
bat has Astros on it.
My dad had one that he gave me with the Mets. It said the Mets because my dad was from Puerto Rico and then the Bronx, and
Yeah,
he was a big Mets guy. I
yeah.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I had the little Astros bat, and I go back to the hotel, and one of my little buddies that I'd met on the trip came to our room. And we were 7. This is back in the day when you could run around the hotel and play around, and nobody worried about some weird adults lurking around. So we just had the run of the hotel. We'd swim, we'd do all this stuff. And this little kid who became my buddy comes to the room, and his name was Troy, and he was from Texas, and he had like this little Southern drawl about him. And he came to the room to go play. And I came out, I had my little bat, and I was all excited. And I showed him my bat, and he looked at the bat, and he looked at me, and my mom's standing there, and he says, "Chad, that looks like a nigger stick. How about you and me take that stick and go see if we can go find us some niggers," right? So that was age 7. And I remember looking at my mom, and my mom had this look on her face, I had this look on my face, and then my mother just sort of sent me off and said, "You know what, go play," because to her, she knew that he didn't really know what he was talking about. He had heard the word, right? But he didn't really know what he was talking about. He was just sort of repeating what he had heard. And we went off and played, and I don't think it ever really came up or was an issue again. But, it's one of those where at an early age, I really learned how it was, racism was kind of a learned behavior, right? Because, he had these words in his head, but I was his buddy, and he couldn't relate the two. But, going back to growing up, I grew up in the school, and, had great friendships with kids, and we all kind of evolved in a lot of ways, but I still, still grew up in that environment where you're hoping that, in social settings, coming up through middle school, coming up through high school, that, almost that you grow up with that angst of hoping that your friends don't say anything offensive because you're not quite sure how to handle it when you're the only person in the room, right? So, you're the only Black guy in the room, and kids are talking, and they may drop an N-word here or there, and growing up in that environment, it's hard to sort of manage how to handle it. And so there was a good amount of amazing, great times growing up in that school environment, but there was also a great deal of stress too. And numbers of positive incidents, numbers of really sort of ugly negative incidents growing up. But throughout that entire experience, growing up in the 80s, going to that school, from 1st to 12th grade. My senior year graduating, I ended up being a captain of the sports teams, captain of the baseball team, captain of the football team, and president of the student council.
Mr. President.
So there you go. So, the senior year, coming out of
I knew that Barack Obama wasn't our first black president.
there you go. I still want to go. I still want to call and find out if they've ever had any other black presidents since me.
I always have him over my shoulder.
There you go. You gotta look out for him. He's right there.
That's right. I got that, and then I got my change.
Yeah.
I got my pictures with him on the walls over here. He's all over my office now. Now I'm gonna have to take him down and put up pictures with you because I thought he was the first black president. But
well,
now I know better.
I can send you some pictures.
Okay, good. And that, because we got to know better so that we can be better and do better. Now I know better. Now I know that Chad Cooper was the first black president.
There you go. So what's interesting though about that is years later, I don't know, maybe 15 years later, I was visiting New Orleans. I was at church with my family, and after church, this random woman comes up, and this older black lady. And she comes up to me and she starts hugging me, and I had no idea who she was. And she just started talking and going on and on about how years and years ago she was a housekeeper in this white family's home, and the son in that family went to my school, and so she saw that as I was coming through high school and being president and all that. It was this tremendous source of pride for her. And I guess the kid in the house looked up to me. Mm-hmm. And so she was hugging on me, and she was, thanking me and all this stuff. And it was sort of awkward. And then after that all happened, my sister, who's always one to kind of, knock me off my high horse, right? as siblings tend to do. Yeah. So
remind me, is it just your sister and you? Was it just your sister and you?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was the youngest of 4. So I have 2 older sisters and an older brother.
So you got knocked off your horse a lot.
I got knocked off my horse all the time. But one of my sisters just looked at me and rolled her eyes and said, "That lady think you black Jesus. You need to go sit down and shut up." She act like you black Jesus. so that
Ladies
happened.
and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Not only was he the first black president, he's also black Jesus. Right here on Cafecito con Colon.
According to Sheridan Cooper, who's always one to knock me down any chance she gets. So anyway,
that reminds me. I hold that thought. I know I do. I'm sorry, Chad. It'd just be better if I just let everybody talk for 45 minutes and didn't even say anything.
That's fine.
I can't help it. It's my show. It's Cafecito con Colon. So here's what's been exciting about the conversation at this moment in time. You said Black Jesus, and in the Philippines there is a region there that really pays homage to the Black Jesus, and I can't remember the name, the proper name, but it's a black as black. Black, his image and likeness is really black. But what I was going to say is there's an interesting conversation going on amongst the Spanish colonial artists right now, because if you look at Spanish Market and you look at all the retablos in my house and the bultos, Jesus, as is traditional, is painted fair skin. And obviously we know, based on historical data, regardless of where your faith lies, we know historically, if you do believe in Jesus, we also know historically, based on region, that he was not a fair-skinned man.
Right.
And so it's interesting that maybe I'm looking at something or someone who is maybe his image might be more like you than the ones that are hanging here in my house, because Chad Cooper could be the Black Jesus.
Possibly, we should look into that and
look into that. No, it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation, right? Like, I don't remember that conversation much going on in that community in the last. And I'm former president of the board of the market, and I don't ever remember that conversation really coming up. But now that community is having the conversation, which is frankly quite awesome.
Yeah, it's worth discussing.
Totally. Go ahead.
So, went off to school, like you mentioned, went off to, actually did a year at a boarding school in Connecticut, Taft School. Then went off to Middlebury College in the middle of Vermont, Ben and Jerry's country. Shout out to Ben and Jerry's.
Right.
But that's an interesting lifestyle, just because I always said, well, where Middlebury was, you're basically right in the heart of dairy country. So it's basically cows and white people. It's just Vermont's the whitest state in the union at one point. So, but that was a tremendous experience, being up in the Northeast. And like I mentioned, went to DC, which is total culture shock, right? You leave Vermont and go to DC, and lived in DC for a couple of years, and then moved to Albuquerque, and came to Albuquerque, and started at UNM, started at Anderson in grad school, got my MBA there, and like you mentioned, started the financial planning practice, started a company with a good friend of mine who's a business student back in the late 90s. And most recently, like you mentioned, we started the Tillman Company, and I had the opportunity to start the company with my dad. My dad was he was injured in Vietnam back in '66. He was in a helicopter crash, and he was a first cav. They were on a helicopter. They were about to jump, and the helicopter was hit, and a number of the men fell out of the helicopter. Some didn't make it. A lot were injured. And my dad, when he fell out of the helicopter, broke his vertebra. So he's been in a wheelchair now 54 years following that accident. He was 18 at the time. So, but an interesting story about this, Brian, I don't know if I ever told you this, but years later, as people started getting on the internet, and my dad retired. He worked for USDA for years and years and retired. He started getting on the internet in like the early 2000s, something like that, and getting in chat rooms and things like that. He ended up meeting a bunch of the men that he served with online. And 2002, it was my 30th birthday. We were having my 30th birthday at the house here in Albuquerque, and my parents flew in to surprise me. I didn't know they were coming. And so they came in, they come to the party, they show up, and then maybe about a half hour later, these other two guys show up, and it turns out that one guy shows up, and he shows up, and it was one of the men that served with my dad. It was actually the man who pulled my dad out from the crash, and he lives in Rio Rancho.
Get out of here.
And there were two or three of them that actually live here in Rio Rancho. And so following that, for about, I don't know, probably about 3 or 4 years after that, they started doing reunions, and they were doing it right there at the Nativo Lodge. And
Heritage Hotels and Resorts, right there, the Lodge brand. Sorry,
so,
this message brought to you by Jim Long and Heritage.
They brought in one of the Huey helicopters out in the I think it was Balloon Fiesta Park field, the field out there. So they started bringing in all these having all these reunions, bringing in all these guys that my dad served with. So it's been it was a very healing thing for him. And I'll tell you, I've only seen my dad cry 3 times in my entire life. And one was recently when my grandmother passed away a few years ago. One was when they put him on the Huey, because it was the Huey helicopter that flew them out, rescued him.
And if you just tuned in, Chad's father's confined to a wheelchair. So
yeah, he's been in a wheelchair for 54 years. And so they put him in the Huey helicopter, and they started, spinning the propellers and everything, and it was incredible. It was incredibly powerful. So with his background and his upbringing, and it's also important to note too that my dad is actually my biological stepdad. He started dating my mom when I was 2. So, he starts dating my mother, and all of a sudden there's these 4 rusty butt kids, with me being the baby. And he's raised us like his own. So
rusty butt, is that a term of art? I've not heard that one before.
that may be a cultural thing, Brian. I'm not sure.
See, I'm listening and learning. I didn't know about rusty butts. Now I do.
Yeah.
And I've been called Rusty my whole life, but no one's ever called me a rusty butt.
So, so growing up with him as my dad, last summer, I had mentioned to him that I was just counseling and mentoring a friend and talking to that friend about establishing his company as an 8A company for government set-asides and that sort of thing. And my dad mentioned, hey, you're talking to a service disabled veteran, right? You ever thought about going into business with me? And I said, all the time. Yeah, that'd be great. So that was really sort of the beginning of it. And then I started doing some research and talking to, some of our great mutual friends, Mike Silva and Charles Ashley and Alex Horton, those guys. And then I connected with a good friend of mine who's a cybersecurity specialist, and we decided to partner up and partner up with my dad, and here we are, almost going on a year later now with multiple relationships with larger IT companies and going after some significant projects. So that's been a great journey, and appreciate your support too, and helping us get off the ground. So that company's coming along. The financial practice is doing well, and you mentioned the UNM Alumni Association. James Lewis brought me in a few years ago. I was chairing the finance committee, and we're looking forward to a great year this year. One of the big things that we're going to be looking at is really connecting UNM alums this year in an initiative we're calling. We don't have a fancy Lobo name for it yet.
Right.
Our working title is the Career Initiative. So, Anderson School does a great job of connecting alums and students and helping alums throughout their careers with mentors and everything else. And different segments of the university do this as well.
Right.
We're looking at doing something on the grand university scale.
I love it.
Connecting all alums together so that we can all mentor each other and throughout our careers. Somebody's looking to move to Albuquerque and they need to get help from Brian Colon. They can find Brian and reach out to him or what have you. So we're working hard to try to build out that program. And then
that's fantastic. And
then also doing, now that I don't know if you know this, Brian, but Mike Silva is our president-elect. So Mike will be president next year. And so Mike will be working on doing more community engagement with the Alumni Association this year. And
what does Mike know about community engagement anyway?
I don't know. That guy doesn't do anything in the community.
I'll tell you what. Hey, listen, we got some great comments in here, and I posted the Tillman website. I posted up your link to the Gateway Financial Advisors so folks can know how to reach out to you, learn more about you, and be able to connect up. But I wanted to, Alex had a great question. When your father was shot down, was he in a Huey when he went down?
I don't think he was in a Huey when he went down, but it was the Huey that flew them out.
Flew him out. Okay.
But I can find out.
I thought that was a very astute question. He's served with distinction in the Marines, and now he's an assistant United States attorney, doing good work there as a public servant and civil servant. So, yeah, that, I appreciate that context, and I think it gives us a good sense of, like I started with, which was that you care deeply about family and community, and now having this opportunity to work with your pops is a big deal, and you're doing great things. I was honored to be there for your opening reception and hearing these stories very early on, and we wish you a lot of success. And the 8A program is an opportunity program, not a set aside, buddy. I'll just tell you that it's an opportunity for the government to engage a diverse population that provides superior service, and that's what Tillman does, right?
Yes, thank you for putting that in better wording for me.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Which was actually the context of our breakfast, right?
That's right. Let's talk a little bit more. We've got about 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that we spend some time, Chad, because you've had some heavy moments that I know about. That we're in our 5th week of Black Voices here on Cafecito con Colon, and I have been so enriched by each and every one of these visits. And we've had conversations, and over time we've been friends for a long time, and yet I continue to bear my soul that it's embarrassing when I think about the fact that I've had about 25 or 30 Black guests on here, many of whom have been friends for a very long time, and none of whom have I ever had the uncomfortable conversation with. And so that in my search to be better, because I know better, I've now had these conversations, and I'm such a better man for that. And I'm doing better, and I'm trying to be a better ally. And maybe you can share with our Cafecito guests, maybe what you'd want us to know. What has that experience been? And maybe, part of it's an uncomfortable conversation that we love the land of enchantment with all our heart, whether we've been here our whole lives like me, or whether you coming in from DC and raising your children here. You're a great ambassador, like the phenomenal Mike Silva, but you also know the reality of what it is to be a Black man in New Mexico.
It's interesting because we all have different stories and we all have different journeys. And I, over the last month or so, kind of like you, I've had a lot of these conversations with friends of mine and people I just wanted to reach out and talk. And I've had a lot of different experiences growing up in the South, living in New England, on the East Coast, and here. And I've heard stories of folks in New Mexico who've had some difficult times. I haven't necessarily had that experience in New Mexico. And that's not to say that others haven't. And it's always a difficult thing for me to talk about that, because I don't want people to get the impression that means that everything is okay. It's
Right.
just, that's been my experience. I was talking about this with a police officer friend of mine who recently retired, and I mentioned that my experiences of getting pulled over by the police have actually been positive, and I'm happy for that. But at the same time, having a 16-year-old son who's now driving, and seeing what's happening in the streets with Black men being pulled over, and this innate fear that people seem to have of Black skin is terrifying for me. I had a conversation yesterday. One of my oldest and dearest friends called me out of the blue, and he saw the last few weeks I'd written some a pretty long, heartfelt Facebook post where everything just kind of got to me, and all I could do was just cry. That's all I could do. My son's wondering why anybody would ever view him as a threat, and trying to explain to him, on the one hand, you belong wherever you want to be, but on the other hand, you still got to be careful because somebody may want to hurt you. So trying to explain all that, and so it all just kind of got to me, and I just kind of got my thoughts together, and put them down, and actually shared them on Facebook, and had a lot of support, and people were sharing the comments, and just there was a lot of I got a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages. We repurposed part of that post and put it in the Howler, and the Alumni Association got a lot of positive feedback for that. But one of the additional benefits that's come out of that is that people have just been reaching out and calling. And I got this phone call from one of my oldest friends. I've known him since first grade, and he's actually my son's godfather. And kind of the same thing. He said, I've known you for 41 years, and we've never had this conversation. I didn't know that you were that you were feeling all these things. But one of the interesting things that he asked me was, as an adult, what's happened? Did something happen to you that's caused all this pain? And I said, I can't put my finger on any specific incidents that have happened to me. But at the same time, that doesn't take away from the fear that I have that it could happen to me. But also that, and more to the point, when we talk about Black Lives Matter and my life mattering, or my son's life mattering, or my wife, or my daughter, or anybody in my family, it feels like when things happen to us, the larger society doesn't care. And what I was telling him was, you guys know me. We grew up together, right? You know me as a person. I've been in your house. I've done all this. And I said, how many times, I can't tell you how many times I've had a friend say to me, when we say the word nigger, we're not talking about you. We might be talking about other people, but we're not talking about you, right? And when you think about people being brutalized or hurt or killed in the street, those people that know that person may be upset, but the larger nation, the larger community outside, it almost feels to me like they're like, oh, well, that's just another Black person killed in the street. It probably did something. He probably had it coming. Black people kill each other anyway. They start giving all these reasons to justify why it's okay for that person to be murdered. And so the thought of not only being hurt in the street, I know we step out of the house every day and there's all kinds of risks that we face, right? But the thought of being harmed in some way, and then people just assuming that I did something, or that my son did something, or that he had it coming in some way, it's terrifying to me that somebody would just assume that. And the best way that I could explain it to him, as we were talking, is, he mentioned that the risks of Black women. He mentioned that. I thought that was great. But I said, I'm not a woman. I don't know what it's like as a woman to walk in fear of being assaulted by a man, right? But I understand if a woman says, I'm afraid to walk, at night somewhere.
Right.
And they're women who have been assaulted by men or raped by men. They're women who haven't, but they all have that fear or that concern. And it's the same for me. I haven't necessarily been assaulted by the police or been hurt by someone, but that fear is there all the time. And I feel like I know how to handle it, but there is always kind of that worry of catching the wrong guy on the wrong day. I told my son, he just started driving. He's got a new truck, and and he goes to private school here. And one of the first things I told him when he got his truck, I said, dude, go to the bookstore, get a school sticker, stick it in the back of your window, so that at least if you get pulled over, a police officer will think, that you're some little private school kid. And actually, I told that story to your boy, Kevin Brown. And Kevin was like, well, assuming they don't assume that he stole the truck, right? And I'm like, oh, Kevin, that's another thing I hadn't even thought about. But it's all these additional things that we have to consider, right? We've still got the same risks and fears, dealing with, in his case, dealing with high school and all those issues that kids have to deal with. But then on top of that, also having to worry about these race issues that are they're a drain. And I talk with him about it, and it's difficult. It's a drain.
I can totally understand that, and I think even the journey you've been on, the lens you've had to look through raising your son in these circumstances, because I think in some ways we're almost okay with trying to anticipate what may happen to us, but the fear of what may happen to our children is even far deeper than that. If
Yeah.
that makes sense to you, I don't know if you can empathize with that, but I certainly feel that way when it comes to Raphael, and I can only imagine that that's true for you. And I was distracted for a minute. I was completely listening, but you got a lot of traffic on your Facebook. Well, it took me forever to find that post you made. I wanted to repost it here. So if folks want to take some time, it's a very thoughtful and heavy post that Chad did, and I was able to post that in the comments section. What he called his Marvin Gaye, Nathan McCall moment. But I did post that in the comments section. But is that right? I mean, you may be able to let your guard down for yourself, and feel confident that in this community that holds you in a certain place, you may not have the fears that some of your colleagues or friends have, that are of color. And Sam yesterday, I think it was Sam was on yesterday, and I think he's listening in today. I mean, he has a similar experience, grew up in Roswell, and really hasn't had to deal with much pain. But you, as a father of a teenager, growing up in this community, you still have to have that apprehension in your heart.
Yeah, and I mean, we were joking earlier. I'm not a morning person, right? And a few weeks ago, my son was going through a phase where he was waking up at like 5:30 or 6 and just getting up and hopping on his longboard and cruising the neighborhood because he was waking up early. And he likes to ride a skateboard, bike, longboard, all that like a teenager. But hearing him go out of the garage at 5:30, which isn't a normal time for a teenager to be out playing, was also terrifying, right? Because now you're out here thinking, we're the only Black family in my neighborhood. You got this kid riding around, possibly with a hoodie on, just in his on his skateboard. I couldn't go back to sleep after that, and I'm sitting there, worried about him, and I don't want to helicopter him to death either. But it's just kind of laying up with my eyes open, waiting for him to come home. And this is at 5:30 in the morning, and it's daylight out.
Right.
So
well, I think that lived experience is important. I mean, it's important to understand, and as a parent, I think I can really empathize with that in some ways. In fact, Aleli and I was always worried that our helicopter blades were actually going to connect and hit, and we were both going to go down in flames, because Raphael had 2 helicopter parents. But I never would have had to worry about him riding his skateboard in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Different. It's just different. It's
So,
just different.
but
So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here, Chad? I mean, we're in this moment, and how do we maximize it? And I've spoken about this quite a bit, which is making sure this isn't a flashpoint. It's not a topic du jour, but that it is a moment in time when we change our approach to life.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that has given me hope, and I know Mike has probably mentioned this also, it feels different this time. It feels like people are motivated. One of my big worries is that, like everything else, we see these shootings happen, or we see these killings happen, and then it stops, right? People are wound up, and they either protest or they're just angry, and people are commenting back and forth on social media, but nothing really happens. And it does feel different this time. This is the first time where I've had people reaching out to me to talk. And one of the things I mentioned in the post is we've got to get to a point where we can listen to each other. Really listen. Like my friend yesterday, he called to listen. He said, "I just want to hear you talk, because I didn't know any of this stuff." And he listened, and that's a great feeling. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, he asked me the same question. I said, one of the things that I need you to do is, we all operate in these environments, especially my white friends, right? And I don't want to say that, well, given the places I went to school, And being one of the only Black students in the school in these predominantly white environments, I hope I have a certain amount of reach to a larger group of white people who know me, and to say, I need you. I need you to speak out when you hear racist language. We need that same level of outrage, and to continue and not just stop. We need folks to make sure that when one of us is killed or one of us is injured, that it's adjudicated properly, and that whoever does this actually goes to jail. I mean, that's the horrific part in all this, is that some of these things happen, we don't hear about it. I mean, I just heard about this Elijah McClain story yesterday.
Right. I
And
think Brianne posted that on my page yesterday. Yeah.
these things we don't hear about until the videos come out, right? So we need folks to be more diligent in making sure that these things are prosecuted. I mean, that's the whole thing for me with the George Floyd thing. The look on that officer's face was this absolute look of, I'm 100% going to get away with this.
Yep.
Because we always do. And so there's so many layers to all this. We need people to make sure that these killings and these murders are actually handled properly in the legal system. We need better policing. I mentioned I was talking with my friend who's the police officer, and one of the things he mentioned was we can't train away somebody's racism, right? So we do have to do a better job of identifying, not necessarily, we do need better training, don't get me wrong, but we also need to do a better job of identifying the officers who are either racist, prejudiced, bigoted, whatever term you want to use, to either remove them from that job or should remove them from the job.
Yeah. No, I think I appreciate that point. Well, I do. We don't have time to get into that real deep, but I think that's something you hit on that is for another conversation, another day probably. But training away racism. I do have this sense, and this is another conversation I had in the last 24 hours with someone else, which was, how racism is ingrained in us as children so often, and it is a learned behavior. It is a philosophical approach and temperament that we adopt from the surroundings that we have as young people, I think, often. And the literature may not support this. This is Brian Colon thinking. Let me just be clear. And so I'd like to believe that at some level, implicit bias training, cultural competency training, history lessons, and all these things can help us better mitigate that. And I don't know that, in your quote, I actually put it in here, was, you can't train away racism. You can't train away someone's racism. And we have to do a better job training and screening. I hope we can think about that more, because I'd hate to have to write off every racist as a lost cause.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, that's been a lot of conversations too, is seeing people evolve. I mean, so telling some of these stories about kids that I went to school with and comments that were said to me in the 70s and 80s, and the majority of them have evolved, and they're still some of my best friends, brothers to this day, right? So I know that people can evolve, but that's that's scary when somebody's got a gun and a badge, and you don't have. It only takes one incident to take away someone's life. One of the interesting things that my friend told me yesterday, and I told him I was going to use his quote, but it made me think about it a lot. But one of the things he said was that we all want to be seen as we see ourselves, right? So if I want to be seen as, the way you see me, right? And it really made me think, when we talk about the police, for example, I would presume that a lot of police want to be seen as protectors and that they're doing the right thing. And so it's hard for a lot of them to be seen in a negative light, right? Or we talk about terms like white supremacy. I'm assuming there's a lot of white people who don't want to be seen in that light as perpetuating white supremacy. So I think as we talk to each other, we need to figure out how to better communicate so that we can get people to let their guards down. But that's also going into a conversation with your guard down too, to be, and that I think goes back to listening and not having your guard up, because there's so many folks that are so defensive, and that we can't hear each other right now, and that's the challenge.
I'm not sure that there's a better note to end on than that. That is really powerful what you just said. I mean, I think in order for us to be able to listen, we have to let our guard down, and we have to not be defensive. And frankly, we have to be vulnerable and candid with ourselves. Even me and my own growth over the last 30 days and having these conversations with what I called, and I didn't come up with this term. It was somebody in the Black community that I heard reference, when it comes to delivering a message and it being received, and that was the context. And they talked about trusted voices or trusted Black voices. And that's what I've been saying. And someone called me out yesterday and said, well, let me get this straight. It hit me awkward when you said trusted Black voices, as if to say there are non-trustworthy Black voices. And I appreciated getting called out on that. But just to be clear, I think what I've tried to do is bring in people who have a footing in the community that has allowed us to be comfortable to receive a message, and to let our guard down, that we can listen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes great sense. I was talking with it's funny, I was talking with Mike yesterday about you, Mike Silva. And we were like, man, we think Brian knows more Black people than we do. We got to figure out, we got to dig into Brian's Rolodex and find out where all these Black people are.
That's funny. That is funny. Somebody asked me that. I said, how have you gotten like 30 Black people on your show in a row? And you're booked a week out. And they said, how did you find all these people? I said, I've known 90%. I think 3 people I didn't have a pre-existing true relationship with. And but let me just say this. So for somebody like me to have that many relationships and never have had uncomfortable conversations with all those folks is sad, and is a real, I think, solid example of where the problem lies.
Well, I think we needed something significant to happen. The conversation I had with my friend yesterday, we actually almost had a similar type conversation back in 1996, because a lot of those feelings that I was telling you about from high school were really bubbling up inside of me, and they were coming out in ways that were not constructive. Mm-hmm. And he picked up on that, and we got to a point where he actually said, we need to talk. And I actually wasn't in a position, age, maturity, whatever it was, to have that conversation. And that was what, 34 years ago, 20, 30, however many years ago. I suck at math.
It's 24. It's 24. I'm your state auditor. I will tell you it's 24.
These calculators, man, they slow down my brain.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I just think now's a time when hopefully more of us will be just aware of our need to listen. And that's what I've tried to do on these cafecitos, and I certainly have been enriched, and I've been enriched by our friendship for 20 years, and I'm grateful for you, and I love you, and I love your family, and have loved watching Santiago grow up. And I'm glad that we got to speak a little bit this morning before we came to camera. Santiago hit the scene over there, and
With his shirt off, because he acts like he doesn't own a shirt.
yeah. Well, if I looked like that, I wouldn't wear a shirt either. I would never wear a shirt if I had that physique. I can promise you that. I would never wear a shirt. Maybe I'd just wear the tie and no shirt. But no, he was great, and even though he and I haven't talked in a while, it's a credit to you how comfortable he was coming to camera and kind of zooming and having a catch-up conversation with me. And I know that I always take pride in Rafael when he interacts with my friends in a way that is respectful and kind and loving, and that's who Santiago is too. And so congratulations.
Well, Rafael blows me away too, man. And I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate all these years of your friendship, and I love you also, and I really appreciate what you're doing with these, and having all these different voices, and giving people an opportunity to listen, and hopefully learn, and hopefully apply some of the things that they hear. Hopefully this adds some value to the conversation, and looks like it is.
I think it does. And you're a phenomenal friend, a phenomenal guest on Cafecito con Colon. Thank you for spending some time. We went over because you're worth it. And I do love you. And I love all of you for joining me and being my extrovert therapist each day on Cafecito con Colon, where we grow and learn together. And I'm grateful to have you join me. And I hope you'll join me again tomorrow for a visit with a lifelong friend, Tommy McKinney. He'll be dialing in from Washington, D.C., who will be coming one step closer to statehood today based on what I anticipate will be a positive vote in the United States House of Representatives. And I look forward to giving you an update on that tomorrow. Let's continue to love one another. Let's continue to listen to one another, particularly the lived experiences of those who don't look like us, so that we can be a better community, and we can be a bolder, more loving, kind community that we can be proud of to pass on to our children. So join in again tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Thank you, Chad Cooper. Next week, we've got some great guests. Tomorrow's Tommy McKinney, but next week, let me see what we got for you next week. Oh, we got Lenton Mowry, the good doctor, is going to be in the house on Monday. One of the co-chairs of all my campaigns, I think. The guy's like, you finally won one, for goodness sake. I can't believe it. So Lenton Mowry will be on a Monday, and then we'll have Dr. Pastor Becknell will be with us on Tuesday. So that's our lineup, a trifecta in a row, following the amazing leadership and friendship and voice of Chad Cooper. Thank you for joining us, Chad. We'll see you tomorrow. Remember, reach out to 3 people in isolation. Make sure they know that they're not alone. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye, Chad.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye-bye.